You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I want to try to explore this phenomenon that seems to be prevalent all over the place, that people are so willing to believe almost anything they hear. And the wilder it is, the more willing they seem to be to believe it. There are also some other parameters here. It seems that if somebody hears it on the radio, they automatically assume that it's true, whether it is or not. And if they see it on television, it's gospel fact, never to be questioned. If it was faxed to them, it is, well, I got it off the fax network, it's got to be true. How many times have you heard that? If it even has the slightest appearance of being an official document, then without any doubt whatsoever, it's fact. Now, I'm saying all this tongue-in-cheek, folks. I'm not telling you that if it looks like an official document, it's fact. I'm telling you this is what people think. How did we get to this point where so much deception is believed by so many? Over a 3-month period, about 4 years ago, just to test and see how much of the stuff that was flowing around was true. This was about 4 years ago. We were plugged into the Patriot Fax Network and a whole bunch of other things, and we were listening to broadcasts, and people were sending us things every day, and they still are. But over a 3-month period, we examined every piece of paper that we received. We examined every fact that was, everything that was alleged to be fact on talk radio, and we examined all the rumors and things that were flying around that people believed. What we found out was amazing. For those 3 months, we actually researched, investigated, and went to the source for every single one of those things. And what we discovered, ladies and gentlemen, is that about 99% of all of it, every bit of it, could have been 98.5%, was false, was a lie, was a fraud, was an out-and-out fake, was a deception, sometimes intentional disinformation, put out by people to manipulate the minds or the thinking of the target audience. Most of it we found was just rumor, hysterical, outlandish, outrageous rumor. Some of the things were pieces of fact. In other words, things taken out of context that if they had been left in context would have had a completely different meaning. What I would like to do tonight is explore with the listeners of this broadcast how people are so willingly fooled, and what makes us that way. And don't think that I'm talking down to anybody, because I used to be that way too until I got my head together. See, for most of my life, I was just like everybody else. Until some things happened, some significant and major events in my life that shook me awake. Literally. And rearranged my brain cells to the point where I didn't believe anything anymore, and still don't. Unless I can prove it. Or unless somebody can prove it to me. But even if they can, I'll take their so-called proof and I will research it myself to see if it really is proof. And sometimes I find that it is, and sometimes I find that it isn't. And there came a point in my life where I went in the bathroom and closed the bathroom door and looked myself in the mirror and admitted to myself, right there, Bill, you've been stupid and ignorant for most of your life. Thinking that you knew everything, you didn't know anything. Now everything that you've ever been taught seems to be the opposite of what you always really thought it was. Now that was hard to do. That's hard for people to do. It was hard for me to do. But I understood that unless I did it, nothing was going to change. My thinking wasn't going to change, and the way I lived my life wasn't going to change, and the way I treated information and acted upon it was never going to change unless I made that confession to myself and realized that it had to change. I mean, it's one day I realized that I was ignorant, that I had been taught a lot of lies throughout my life and made some assumptions on those lies that created other lies in my own mind. One of which that when I volunteered to go fight in Vietnam, somehow I was fighting for freedom and defending this country. And that was not true at all. And some old ghosts came back in my mind. Just the other day I was watching one of the the mother of one of these three soldiers who have been captured by the Yugoslavian forces. And she said on television that she was proud of him. She was proud of the fact that he was over there fighting for our country. And I cringed because I heard echoes of my own pronouncements in my youth when I was in the military service and volunteered to go fight for my country in Vietnam. And I felt sorry for her because she really believed it, and it is a lie. None of those men over there are fighting for this country. They're fighting for world government, for the new world order. They are fighting under a foreign command. Now, the Communist News Networks has the sheeple pretty much fooled into thinking they're fighting for the United States of America because the commanding general is General Clark. But General Clark answers directly to the head of the NATO Council, who is a Spanish Marxist, globalist, New World Order proponent. All of them, whether they are so-called peacekeeping troops in Bosnia, Macedonia, or anywhere else, or whether they're in the NATO forces attacking the nation of Yugoslavia, they are all United Nations world government troops. They are not fighting for this country. I may have been the only one watching that broadcast who realized it. I hope that that's not true. I hope that many other people realized it, but I don't see any indication of that. But this poor woman was under the delusion that her poor son was captured by an enemy force while he was fighting for his country. And that was a lie. And so I'd like to, I really want to explore this tonight. I want to get your input. I want to find out some of the things that we've been led to believe that are not true. I remember one night listening to Mark Kornke's intelligence report. And he was telling everybody that the United States military was going house to house in the southeastern United States confiscating guns. It was a lie. I knew it was a lie the moment I heard it on the radio, but it persisted for weeks, and they gave reports on the progress of the seizure of weapons from the hands of Americans in these house-to-house searches in the southeastern United States. And some deluded idiots even began calling into other radio shows and began to say that they were witnesses, that they had seen it, and that they had had their own guns confiscated, and streets were blocked off, and there were military people standing on the corners. And I know a lot of you listening to this broadcast tonight remember this. And I'm just using this as one instance. It was a lie. Not only was it a lie, it was an intentional lie. Another lie was that United Nations troops had invaded, along with tanks and armored vehicles and everything else, had invaded Andrews, where the federal law enforcement officials were looking for the suspect of the bombing of that abortion clinic. That was another lie. And there's many, many more that I can cite, but I want you to call in when I open the phones, not before, and tell me some of the tales that you've heard, where you heard them from, and that turned out to be false. And I want to hear from you whether you believed it or not, and why, or why you didn't, and what you thought when you found out that it was false, and whether or not you were so willing to believe that source again. What I've experienced is that the same people are believing lies over and over again from the same sources all the time, and don't seem to ever put two and two together that, hey, the last 15 things this guy's told me has been a lie. Why am I believing this guy? And then he tells another one, and they fall right in and believe him again. One of those is Art Bell. Art Bell does it almost every night. He turned a harmless meteor shower into an alien invasion one night, and I heard people calling in panicking. There was even a truck driver who said on the air while he was talking to Art Bell, he says, you know something, I saw these things come down, and I thought it was just a meteor shower until I heard your broadcast, and now I'm scared. Remember that? Remember recently on April the 1st, the morning of April the 1st, his power went out, and he claimed that it was the failure of the power plant because of Y2K, because April the 1st is the day that they went over to the fiscal year, and 2000 was now the year. Well, we have a lot of listeners in Pahrump, right where Art Bell is. They were absolutely amazed because their power didn't go out, and they get power from the same power plant. And so a little investigation showed that a cat had climbed up on a transformer and shorted out the transformer in Art Bell's neighborhood. But Art Bell on the air said it was because of Y2K, and the whole area of Nevada had gone dark. He lied. Plain as day, plain as the nose on his face, he lied. And by the way, the fiscal year for many companies and corporations did click over on April the 1st, ladies and gentlemen. And as far as I know so far, nothing has failed because of Y2K, even though they're now actively using the date 2000. Don't believe me? Check it out for yourself. It's true. Remember, they were all saying that the failures would begin in January. Well, there were no failures in January. Then they said the failures would begin April the 1st when many companies and power plants and transportation organizations began to go into the new fiscal year, which would be actively using on their computers the date of 2000. Well, April 1st came along and nothing failed then either. Now they're telling you what? And everybody's still going off the deep end. Hysteria. Also, on April 1st, or just before April 1st, Art Bell said on the air that his website had been hacked by the Yugoslavian Serbs, and his whole website had been replaced with a page that they put there. He lied to his audience and later confessed that it was an April Fool's joke, that he had captured their webpage and put it up there himself. Him and what's his name that runs his website. I could go on and on and on. Bo Grites. Bobo Grits, as we call him here. Bobo because he is a bobo for thinking that all of us are so stupid as to hear him constantly contradict himself and lie repeatedly that we're going to continue to believe him. And he's grits because when the majority of patriots find it out and the proverbial buffalo chip hits the fan, they're going to eat this guy for breakfast, and where I come from, that's grits. It is absolutely amazing how this is carried out and how people believe it and rave and rant and get scared and do crazy things and pass this stuff on. Now, the purpose of this broadcast tonight is not to ridicule anybody. I just want to explore how this happens and how we can get it to stop. And to do that, we're going to have your participation. I need you to call in and say, hey, I know exactly what you're talking about. I was listening to so-and-so, or somebody handed me a piece of paper, or I got this over the fax machine, and I believed it. And I went and did this, and this, and we were getting all prepared for this, and that, and then all of a sudden we found out it wasn't true, or the date came and went, and nothing happened. And so this is what I thought about it then, and this is what I'm doing about it now, or however you want to treat this. I want to try to get at some of the root reasons. Why is it that we buy this stuff? Why is it that everybody I've ever asked about Stanton T. Friedman, if they were a used car dealer, would they buy a car from him? They say no, but they believe everything he says about flying saucers. If you wouldn't buy a used car from Stanton T. Friedman, why in the world would you buy a flying saucer? You see, these are the things that I can't understand that I would like to reach some kind of understanding about tonight. If we can't understand why something happens, then we can't combat it properly to make sure that it doesn't happen. And so while you're listening to this, and I go get me some ice water, you guys can prepare and figure out, what you're going to talk about when you call in, and we'll get the show on the road.
Rain no more.
Good evening. You're on the air.
Hello, Bill. This is Jeffrey in New Orleans.
Hi, Jeffrey. You're our first caller for the night. You know the parameters of the subject, right?
I certainly do, and it's right up my alley because I've been through a lot of those experiences, and I can tell you why these things happen and give you some examples.
Okay, go for it.
First of all, you pointed out on your show about how many people are subject to living as they did in high school.
Yes.
High schools do not teach people how to do research or teach people that different people have different viewpoints and that they have to find out how to think. And people are not taught logic except in college. And of course, being objectivist-based and being a follower of Ayn Rand, I'm very well familiar with the damage that kind of philosophical problem does to people. Let me give you a brief example of an incident that occurred this week.
Okay.
Tuesday, on a show entitled Information Wars over Republic Radio Network and Chuck Harder's For the People, both commentators stated that a decision, Wyoming versus Houghton, I think that's what it is, allowed the government to enter your car and search you personally for contraband if you were carrying it on your person. Well, I got scared, of course, because I thought that they might want to search me, and if they found the kind of cane that I use, they might confuse it for a gun and try to shoot me. So what I did Wednesday morning, thanks partially to you and also thanks to a lot of other things, I went to the law library and got the decision and read it. It's actually almost as bad as they said, but not exactly the same. The decision actually involves the permission of the government to allow police to search cars in terms of your baggage or your belongings for what they call contraband. The decision is based on the comparison of an automobile to an 18th century ship and the comparison of the police force to the U.S. Customs agents who can go into a ship and search the ship without warrants. Now, the problem with the decision, of course, is that this does give police expanded powers to search your belongings, claiming that you are guilty of the same offense that the police are accusing the driver of, and this specifically applies to drugs. There is a limitation, however, in Dyer, D-Y-R-E, I believe it is, 333, which was made in 1948, in which the police are prohibited from personally strip searching you under those kinds of situations. But still it's bad because the fact is that we have allowed our government to become a government of court decisions and not constitutional citations. But the real point is that you cannot allow these scaremongers to come at you with all of these summaries and so on when even they get it wrong and try to overwhelm you with fear and sneer, etc., etc. So I would have to say this: the lack of teaching logic in college and high school, the lack of application of it through objectivism, and the lack of exposing people to the fact that different people have different opinions and that they have to decide on the basis of fact alone is what's causing all of this problem. And that unless we go back to that kind of an education system, and unless we go back to demanding facts, not faith, we're not going to get anywhere.
Okay. So you're saying that people are just listening to this and assuming that the people rendering this information on the show are assuming that those people did the proper research and are just taking the ball and running with it like that.
That's correct, and this is true for most of the people who listen to the nightly news networks and all these other networks and don't bother to read different sources, and that's why you're seeing the disaster that you're seeing in Kosovo. That's why you're seeing the disaster with Chinagate and the rest, because the insiders can get away with everything they want to get away with because people aren't willing to recognize that you have to deal with facts, not opinions given by other people. And it goes back to high school where you're taught, do what the teacher tells you and accept what the teacher says or else. And that's the wrong way to teach it.
Well, you're absolutely correct. I think it goes a little deeper than that, though, and I'm not sure how or why, but I think it does. Because I'll tell you what, not all of these things that people believe are presented as facts. They're hysterically delivered and aren't even, there are no facts even alluded to, and people will take the ball and run with it. Have you experienced that?
Yes, I have. I've experienced that sometimes with the many of the shows like David Smith's Newswatch and many of the religious prophecy people who claim that we're in the end time, et cetera, and they don't bother to point out the problem of the Industrial Revolution that contradicts some of their own statements. And the joker is that they're using feelings to support their own viewpoint, and feelings don't work. But too many people who are religiously based rely on feelings rather than reason, and the result is disaster.
Well, I think you've got something there. I mean, that's how old Bobo Grits was convincing people to listen to him for a long time. He would go to one section of the country, and whatever religion was practiced there by those people, he would profess to be of that religion. He professed to have no religion at all when he went to Sedona and was speaking to a mostly New Age crowd who have shunned Christianity and Judaism and all of the standard establishment religious institutions, Mormonism and all of these other things. And he said that he had actually went and attended churches and studied different religions all his life and had never found even one that he could believe in. And so they were ready to accept his message because he presented no threat to them. When he went up into the Northwest and the North, actually the Western Plains states, he would identify himself as being Christian identity. And a lot of those people are Christian identity. And so he would get them to accept his message because he was one of them. And recently on his broadcast, he has been promoting all of the old boogaboo things that were rampant in Germany just prior to and during Hitler's rise to power. And all this time, actually, and in reality, he was an active practicing member of the Mormon Church. And when he would talk to Mormons, he would actually get up and cry real tears and say how thankful that he was to be a member of the Mormon Church. And I could go on and on and on and on, but that's one of the methods that deceives people, is that if they believe you're one of them, they will welcome and believe your message, when in reality you may not be one of them at all.
That's correct, and that is one of the reasons why we have to be very, very careful of statements based on emotion. I'm going to let you go and let other people come in, but I figured I better get in on this thing at the first and give you this information.
Well, thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
Why is it, ladies and gentlemen, that we tend to look for people who believe, as we do, either politically or religiously, and whether they're telling the truth or not, we tend to believe them simply because we consider them to be one of us? Good evening, you're on the air.
Bill, this is John from Pennsylvania. I came to the same conclusion you did about the Patriot movement. I was very disillusioned after you had chased these stories. Just be one dead end after the next. And the one story that really convinced me was a Mark Key story. He had a radio communications expert on his show, and they were talking about the breakdown of society and how ham radios and so-called CB radios would help you in communication amongst your units or friends or whatever. He said that we should take advantage of the repeater towers that are already in installation and used by law enforcement and military. So you should buy radios of their frequency so that you can take advantage of their repeater towers that line all the interstate highways all across the country and use their frequencies.
And?
Well, wait a minute. This is crazy. Who would be listening to it? Who has the equipment to monitor everything that's said?
Right on.
And then this...
And I wonder why he would be telling you to do that, knowing
Well, after
that.
I heard that, I said there's more to this guy than what meets the eye.
Yes.
And then a caller called up and said the first thing you want to do is take those towers out. If you have any breakdown of society, that's their communication link. That would be the first thing you'd want to take out, so they can't communicate, not use their frequency. It's ridiculous. And Corky said, yeah, he's right. That's a good point. He just jumped back and forth.
Yeah, well,
The bad conclusion I came to, Bill, I hate to say this, is I think the other side that we're actually fighting here actually has more credibility than the Patriot movement, because they're telling you what they're going to do.
Yeah, they do in some ways. In other ways, they manipulate the thinking of all of the people, not just here in America, but around the world. But if you even have half a brain, you can see through that manipulation. I mean, it's so childlike.
Right.
Really, it is. And it's just the repetition of the same thing over and over again. And if you've got a brain and you watch the pictures that they present and listen to what they say, sooner or later you find out that these things are lies. And it's so easy for me to do. I just don't understand why other people can't do it.
Well, I think we're all pretty much on the same wavelength now. I think a lot of people have educated and come up through the ranks, and they're starting to see through the malarkey.
Well, good. I certainly hope so.
Yeah, I think we are. You're helping out a lot.
You know that the other day on CNN, on the 4 days, they presented a videotape of some atrocities that supposedly happened in Kosovo, and they said they happened on a certain date, and they weren't watching what they were doing. And right down in the lower corner of the videotape was the date that the videotape had actually been made, was months before.
Bill, they're the most well-dressed refugees I've ever seen. Those people look very healthy, and they look like they're well taken care of.
Not only that, but did you see the other day, I think it was Sunday, I believe it was Sunday, they were showing all these refugees coming in this big long line, and there was a line of women there who had bread. They were Albanian women who had come with bread, and they were sticking out this bread for people to take. Not one person took one loaf of bread. Not one.
Yeah, it looks like more misconception here. Deception's the word.
Yeah, and they're trying to find all those refugees that were in that camp. Well, I think they ran out of money to pay them, and I think they all went home. That's what I think happened. I think they just all went home.
Yeah, well, that's what it looks like. Looks that way. Okay, so I'll let you go. I know you have a lot of callers.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
520-333-4578. What personal experience can you give us? What swayed you to believe something at some point? How did you find out that it wasn't true, and what did you do about it? Good evening, you're on the air.
Yeah, Bill. I don't really have any story to tell, but I wanted to comment a couple other things. You just were talking about those refugees.
Yeah.
I also noticed that they were saying that it was old men and women were the that they didn't know what happened to the young men. And all the time that they're saying that, there's young men walking around in the film footage behind them.
All over the place.
In their 20s.
Yeah, hundreds of them.
30s. And yet they were saying, standing right there, saying that there wasn't any young men or, men in the 18 to 25 or 30 range, but it was all women and children and old people.
Well, you know what?
All kinds of young guys, in their 25s or 30s walking around in the crowds behind them.
Yeah, you know what happened, don't you? Remember the tractor with the old guy driving it? With the women and children in the back?
Yeah, right.
they showed that for so many days they couldn't show it anymore, and they had to show all the young men, because if they showed that tractor one more time, people were going to start throwing things into their TV set.
I noticed that too. There's a lot of this. My young boy, I have a boy that's 12, and he said, "Hey, that's the same guy we saw the other time.
Yeah,
the other place.
It's the same guy driving the same tractor with the same trailer with the same women and children in the tractor. They showed it for days and days and days." And they kept saying, "These are new refugees who are coming across." And then they'd go to another location altogether, and it'd be the same guy driving the same tractor with the same trailer with the same women and children in it.
I also noticed, that in the background there was people like strong arming people, like forcing people onto buses or whatever. People being forced to do things.
Yeah.
A lot of that. And the other thing I wanted to comment on,
and those weren't Serbs and they weren't Yugoslavians. They were people in these refugee camps, supposed after they crossed the border.
Right. The other thing I wanted to comment on all this, deception and bullshit that's out there. I think that a lot of this is that people are running around spinning their tails, following these stories, and then eventually they find out it was a bunch of crap. And what happens is, I think that it's deliberate, because someday they may be doing these things, and when the story comes out, everybody go, "Oh, it's not real," and blah blah blah.
Well, that could be, but it's incumbent upon people to check things out and find out what's true and what's false. You can't dismiss things offhand unless you have some proof for it, and you can't accept things offhand either unless you have facts to prove it.
And there's a lot of ways to do that. For instance, like when that deal in Kingsville, Texas was started up with the helicopter thing, I just called down there and found out, it was definitely going on. And then I called a toll-free guy that has a coin shop down there. It was a toll-free number, and I just called him for a couple minutes and asked him if it was really happening, and I made a few phone calls like that. The other thing I've noticed, and I think it would be really good if I really do, I've noticed a lot of, I should do this, I've been collecting these toll-free numbers that they keep putting on the mouthpiece of the Communist News Network. All these different socialist groups and I can't even think off the top of my head, but a whole collection of them. They're always putting these numbers up to call, right?
Yeah.
And just the other day they put one up, a group of tax consultants that you can call to help you with your April 15th deadline and all this other nonsense that they keep peddling.
Yeah.
And we should collect all those toll-free numbers and put them out, and everybody should just call them up and just bombard them with the truth, Their nickel.
I don't know how much good that would do, but if people want to do that, that's certainly okay with me. We were talking about how these journalists are you can't rely upon them to tell the truth. I just discovered something, and I want to find out how many more people out there in the listening audience know about it. Does anybody know if Christiane Amanpour is married, and if so, who's she married to? Anybody know the answer to that?
I couldn't tell you, but I'll get off and see if somebody else is out there.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, bye-bye.
520-333-4578 is the number. We're exploring this deception and why people believe it. Why is it so easy for us to believe all these lies? And what do we do about it when we find out that they're lies? Good evening, you're on the air.
Good evening, calling from Canada, Bill. I happened to listen to RFPI on shortwave last night. You know who they are. Radio for Peace.
Radio for Peace International?
Yeah, in Costa Rica, okay?
Yeah.
And they were talking about Tim McVeigh and all these so-called hate broadcasts on shortwave. And guess who was included? Bill Cooper.
Oh, I wonder why.
And they went on and on about the Oklahoma bombing, and they said Tim McVeigh was one of your regular listeners, and he also visited you in Arizona. Is that true?
Yes, he did. But I'm the one who announced it on the air and told the world.
Well, anyways, the way they put it, they connected you with the Oklahoma bombing as if you had something to do with it.
Well, you know what? If you can send me a recording of that broadcast, I will take it and shove it right up their ass.
Well, I wish I had recorded it, but maybe somebody else did.
Well, I hope somebody did, because I will certainly do that. They have opened themselves up for all kinds of action if they made those kinds of connections.
Well, I just thought I'd let you know.
Lots of people have come to visit me. Most of them, some of the best people you'd ever meet in your life, some of them raving maniacs, some of them people that you have no idea who or what they are, because I'm on the radio.
Yeah, but...
And they do the same thing with Rush Limbaugh and Ted Koppel and everybody else. And how would they know if Tim McVeigh listens to this broadcast?
Well, you know the spin that they put on their stories, and so they sort of connected you with the Oklahoma bombing.
Well, get that on tape, and I will make them eat it, literally. I will shove it so far up their ass they will regret it forever. I know who is back of this Radio for Peace International. It's not Radio for Peace International at all.
It's an Oregon outfit.
It's owned and operated by a bunch of Marxist, socialist, communist professors at the University of Oregon.
Right.
I know exactly who they are.
Uh-huh.
And they had better be cleaning that up real quick, because I'll have these people forking out money by the pile real fast if I can get that on tape from anybody.
Well, I hope I can get a tape, or somebody can.
Well, please do, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I don't. You see, a lot of people, fall down when these people do things like that. I don't. You take a shot at me, you're going to get shot back. If you're right, that's okay. But if you're wrong, I'm gonna knock you down, and I'm gonna knock you down really heavy and really bad. Radio for Peace International is a Marxist, socialist, communist group of professors who teach at the University of Oregon. It is a propaganda organization that is on the air only to try to get people not to listen to those of us who are telling you the truth. And if you just listen to them for 5 minutes, you can pick this up unless you're completely and totally brain dead. You can see exactly where these lying creeps are coming from. But don't worry. Somebody get me a tape of that broadcast, and I will make them regret the day they were born if they made any such connection like that whatsoever. Good evening. You're on the air.
Yeah, Bill, this is Dale. I believe Christiane Amanpour is married to that James Rubin, the Deputy Secretary of State that does those briefings.
How do you know that?
Oh, boy. I've read it somewhere.
You've read it somewhere?
Yeah, and if I don't have it, I didn't clip it out or nothing, but I believe that's who she's married to. They were making a big deal out of it when they were engaged about a year ago.
Yeah, well, you're right. So much for Christiane Amanpour's objectivity. She is.
I never did consider that she had any objectivity.
She claims that she does, but she's just a puppet mouthpiece for the State Department.
Yeah, I remember, I think it was about a year ago when...
and her husband, James Rubin, is one of the biggest liars, slimy, snake, slippery guys that I've ever seen in my life. You can ask him a direct question, and he'll do a river dance for you all around the world, but he won't answer that question. He'll answer every other question that you didn't ask.
Yeah. Something else I've been wondering, that I haven't had to check out yet, but are all these Rubens connected with the same Reuben that's
I don't know.
Secretary of the Treasury?
I don't know.
There seem to be a lot of Reubens in this administration.
Well, there may be. I only know two. Which other ones do you know?
Well, I know at least those two.
Well, that's not everybody in this administration, is it?
No, but it's two Reubens in this administration. I believe I've heard of another Reuben that's also connected somehow.
Yeah, but that's a lot different than everybody in this administration is a Reuben. You know, that's what we're trying to talk about on
here. In this administration.
Yeah, but why would you say that when it's not? Obviously not. Everybody in the administration is named Reuben.
Well, I thought that I said a lot of them, not everybody.
Well,
I love Reuben.
That's what it comes across as.
Okay.
Okay?
No, I didn't mean it to come across that way.
Well, I know, but that could mislead a lot of people.
Well, we got to be careful.
You watch tomorrow, somebody will be calling somebody saying, you know, everybody in the administration's named Reuben.
Yeah.
That's how it starts.
Only two for sure that I know of.
Yeah, well, it's the only two for sure that I know of. There's probably more. There's a lot of people.
And one of them is reported to be married to Christiane Amanpour.
Yeah, well, she is.
And I believe they were engaged, I think when she was over there in Iraq doing that stuff.
Isn't it amazing how these things tie together?
Might as well all intermarry. They're all the same side.
Well, thanks for your call.
Okay, thank you.
520-333-4578 is the number. Good evening, you're on the air.
Yeah, Bill, I was listening to VOA this morning, and they said on the Eritrean-Ethiopian border there's been the largest tank battle ever taking place. And in the last 4 days, 20,000 people have been killed. They said that the Eritrean forces were dug in. You couldn't even see their tanks. And the Ethiopians came up through this minefield area that they funneled the tanks into, and they almost penetrated their built-in defenses by the Eritreans, and the tanks were some of them were less than 60 meters apart, blasting at each other, and 20,000 people have died in 4 days.
Where did you hear this?
This was VOA.
Voice of America?
Yeah, on 1600 Zulu time on 15410 today.
Voice of America is the propaganda arm of the Central Intelligence Agency.
Oh, I realize that. But, I just thought that was very interesting that they would have that on, yet you wouldn't see it anywhere else broadcast.
Well, no, because it didn't occur. I can assure you it did not happen.
Oh, okay.
But I can see how they would want people in Yugoslavia to think that it was happening to scare them,
Right.
And I happen to know for a fact that Voice of America is now moving transmitters into place all around Yugoslavia, and they're going to start bombarding Yugoslavia with 24-hour-a-day propaganda broadcasts.
Well, they talked about VOA yesterday that they were flying C-130s over broadcasting AM, FM, and television transmission.
Yeah, it's all propaganda. Voice of America is like Radio for Peace International. They're just a bunch of bullshit propaganda, lying, Marxist, socialist people who manipulate. They tell lies, they deceive, and they try to manipulate large populations into believing anything other than the truth.
Right. So two things that I'm off. One, that new VOA guy, this new chief administrator there, company is Falcon Cable. It's supposed to be like the second largest cable company. I suggest anybody that has Falcon Cable just cut that right away and do something else. You've got to watch TV anyway. Secondly, I'd like to point out, I wasn't sure if I heard it because I wasn't listening that long, if you had said that the Germans had everybody turn in their radios for FM radios for short distance broadcasts so they could only listen to signals that were generated locally. That was during World War II. Then that way they could control the people because no one could hear shortwave radios or anything like that. Strictly FM only was I think, the law there.
Every oppressive regime that's existed since radio was developed has always tried to do that. But people in times of oppression have always hid their shortwave radios, and that becomes their source of news for large numbers of people. One shortwave radio might be the source of information for tens of thousands of people in one little area.
Can I quickly expand on that for a moment?
Sure.
I'm 43. When I was about 8 years old, maybe 9 years old, we lived in Manhattan Beach, and we had people come down for the summer and rent beach houses. And this one family brought this huge radio with them. And, we would go in there and listen to them, and they were just, come down for the week or whatever. And I remember them telling me that was the radio that they listened. They were Dutch, and they'd hidden the thing in the cellar, and that was the radio that they listened to the news during World War II. So they took it with them because it was a definite piece of a part of their family. Yeah. Because that was what gave them the truth at the time of the terrible time that they had. Okay, thanks, Bill.
You're welcome.
Good evening.
What's so laughable about this stuff is these clowns are so silly. I mean, you've all been listening to me for years. If I was going to do something, I would not blow up a federal building in Oklahoma City or have anything to do with it. I certainly wouldn't blow up children because I love children, and you all know that. If I really were to go to that kind of extreme, I'd blow up the White House. If I was going to become overnight a revolutionary and do something extremely violent, that's what I would do. I would go after the kingpins, not the poor people who are just working, trying to earn a living down in some building somewhere. Good evening. You're on the air.
Yes, Mr. Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
I'm calling from Canada, and I hope what I'm about to say is within the parameters of your broadcast tonight. To talk about why people are so willing to believe what they see, for instance, on TV. I was watching CNN the other night, and not CNN, pardon me, it was a local radio broadcasting channel 4 up here. And I watched some of the family members. It was a couple of sisters of one of these American soldiers who are purportedly abducted by the Serbian forces over there. And the camera must have not gave them the right cue, because just before they were interviewed, they were giggling and laughing and having a great old time as if they didn't have a care in the world. And then when the camera focused on them and the interviewer started talking to them, all of a sudden their expressions of joy and laughter changed to tears and sadness. That told me something.
Well, good.
This is a setup.
Yeah, that's right. Most of it so far has been.
I don't know whether anybody else seen that particular interview.
I hope so. I think people need to start watching and thinking while they're watching instead of sitting there in a trance, just absorbing whatever they're told.
Well, you just used the word trance, and before I called you, that was the word that I was going to use, but I forgot it. They don't think critically enough. They are sitting there. They're only seeing half the message, and they're really ignoring a whole lot of clues that reveal the truth about what really is happening.
Yeah, most people, when they watch television, they actually go into kind of a trance, and it's a receptive state where they're receiving information but not questioning any of it. I've watched this happen. I mean, they even look like they're in a trance.
Exactly. And another thing, in trying to find out the answer to why so many people are willing to be conditioned and brainwashed, is when you turn on the TV, it's a very easy thing to do. It's readily available. We need more people like yourself, where you reach more people than who you are. I mean, for instance, to bring you in on my shortwave radio, I really enjoy listening to you, but it's not that relaxing because I keep having to adjusting the dial. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Sure.
I wish people like you, who are critical thinkers and who can educate the rest of us and teach us how this stuff is pulling the wool over our eyes. I just wish there was more messages like yours out there.
Well, I do too. It would give me some slack. It would give me a break. I'm only doing this really because nobody else was doing it. I could not do it. There was a vacuum here.
Well, I certainly admire you, and I'd just like to say before I hang up, I appreciate what you're doing. Keep up the good work, and
well, thank you very much.
Thanks again.
I appreciate that.
Bye now.
Thank you for calling. Yeah, folks, if I was going to turn into some violent person who was going to act something out, nope, I wouldn't go down and blow up a federal building. No siree. I would take over the National Guard unit. I would arm those of like minds, and I'd do it seriously. I would attack the oppressors, not the poor people trying to make a living in some office somewhere. And, I'll keep telling you what I would do. Good evening. You're on the air.
Yeah, you're talking about Christian Amanpour.
Uh-huh.
And I heard it on, it was a shortwave program last night.
I need you to talk a lot louder.
It was put out on a shortwave program last night. That's where I heard it, that she was married to Assistant Secretary of State James Rubin.
Yeah.
So I've heard it, from a different source than that one gentleman, so I assume that's true. But in my opinion, Mr. Cooper, when you connect all the dots, it's very easy to see. It's the Jews, baby.
Oh, there's another fool. You know what? These people who say that, you know what religion they belong to? It's called Christian identity. And when you study Christian identity, ladies and gentlemen, guess what it is? It's the Jewish religion. It's the Jewish religion. And it amazes me that people who practice the Jewish religion and ignore the teachings of Jesus would hate the Jews when they claim to be the Jews. Isn't that amazing? They haven't got anything between their ears, except maybe oatmeal. I love it when they call up and make such fools of themselves. 520-333-4578. No, it's not the Jews, it's the fools. It's the fools. 520-333-4578 is the number. Good evening, you're on the air.
Hi, William.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good.
You're coming in like a local here.
Good, that's great. Where are you at?
Somewhere in North America.
Somewhere in North America?
Yeah.
Are you afraid somebody's going to find out where you're at?
Oh, they probably do.
How?
How?
Yeah.
Well, they just do. It just...
I think you need a brain transplant, my friend. By telling me the town that you're in on the radio, nobody's going to find you in that town. Unless, of course, they trace the call. And you weren't smart enough to know that. You wouldn't give me the town or the port of the country you lived in, but you weren't smart enough to know that if they really wanted to know where you are, they just trace your call. I think they're having a sale on brains at Walmart. If you get down there real quick, you can get some. Good evening, you're on the air. Hello?
Hello?
Yes?
Bill?
Yes?
I think the greatest thing that has skewered the American thinking was the misrepresentation of the political scale. Could you clear it up once and for all and deduct and prove that the Nazis and the Nazi socialists are on the left and not the right?
Oh, that's easy to do. And Hitler was a socialist. He admitted it. And his party, the Nazi Party, was the National German Socialist Workers' Party.
Exactly.
The fight in Germany was not between the right and the left. It was between the socialists and the communists.
Right.
And the socialists did not understand Karl Marx's teachings that the whole purpose of socialism is to lead to communism.
Right.
And that's where the battle was. The battle was between the communists and the socialists. The Nazis.
To understand that anarchy is the far end of the right, at the right side of the scale.
That's right. The scales always have measured two opposites.
Well, I know that skewed my thinking for decades.
Well, it skews a lot of people's decade thinking. That's what people like Radio for Peace International are trying to do. They're trying to skew people's thinking to think that Hitler was on the right when Hitler was clearly a socialist on the left, just one notch above communism.
Exactly. And I commend you for making that clear. Also, I commend you on the ozone exposure.
Well, thank you.
That was one more item that skewed our thinking.
Yeah.
There must be millions others like it.
Well, there are. That's what this broadcast is all about.
War for China. It's amazing that he didn't invite them over because of the fact they've already condemned us for what we're doing in Yugoslavia. And I think that's amazing. And on top of that, the hypocrisy, I don't know if you caught his latest quote, but he said, in order for America to be good abroad, we must be good at home. Thinking to myself, this guy, what does he know of the word good? What does that got to do with anything? I mean, this guy is the most amoral person.
Yeah.
He's a hypocrite.
It's true. That's like Al Gore over the weekend making his speech about making the world safe from men dressed in black wearing ski masks who break down doors and hurt people in the middle of the night. I couldn't believe that he said that. I mean, it goes on in this country every night.
Yeah.
All over the place. Men dressed in black, wearing ski masks, killing people.
What was that in relation to? What was he?
He was trying to say that this is what the Serbs are doing in Kosovo.
Exactly. And here we are. We've got, must have about 5 different paramilitary groups underneath the Treasury Department that do this, like you say, all the time.
Yeah, that are not even lawful agencies of the government.
I don't know.
Did you know that every agency has to be listed in the organizational table of the Department of Government in the law? No. Go into the United States Code, look up the Department of the Treasury, and see if you can find the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms or the Internal Revenue Service listed anywhere. They're not there. And they're not there because they are not lawful agencies of the Department of the Treasury or the United States government. How about that?
I didn't know that. That I didn't know.
It's the truth.
Wow.
Also, go into the United States Code where every trust fund administered by the United States government must be listed and is listed, and find one for Social Security. There isn't any. It's all in the law. Just most Americans never look in the law.
No.
They think it's too complicated. It's easy. Okay, thanks for calling.
Hey, thank you, and I'm going to keep listening.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
520-333-4578 is the end. Yeah, these little Marxist professors up at the University of Oregon are going a little bit too far when they start slandering me over the air. Because they're not in Puerto Rico, and they're not in Costa Rica, and they're not in South America or South Africa. They're in Oregon. And they don't think that anybody knows who really runs Radio for Peace International, but I know who runs it. I know their names. I bet they won't sleep too good tonight. Good evening, you're on the air.
Yes, Bill, good evening. This is Annette from Bournesboro.
Hi, Annette.
I have a comment on the Jewish religion. I think it requires some clarification. The Jewish religion is the Babylonian Talmud, which has nothing to do with the Hebrew Torah, which we understand is in the Christian Bible. And so you cannot associate...
Excuse me, Annette, but you're wrong. The Hebrew Torah is in the Christian Bible.
That's right. Yes,
okay.
That's exactly what I'm saying. But that's not the Jewish religion.
Yes, it is.
No, the Hebrew Torah was the religion of the Israelites. The Jews have the Babylonian Talmud as their religion, and that is what is at the basis of their mindset. If you have studied the Babylonian Talmud, it is...
My dear Annette, most Jews that I have known all my life have never studied or read the Babylonian Talmud. They study and read and practice what is taught in the Torah.
Bill, let me explain something. The mindset, it comes through the synagogue, is that the Babylonian Talmud is what their policy comes from. They may read a portion of Isaiah or a portion of another prophet, but the Babylonian Talmud speaks of these prophets, but they have an oral law in the Babylonian Talmud that is the opposite of the true Hebrew Torah, and that's where the real conflict is. Because
Annette, there are some people who practice the belief of the Babylonian Talmud. Most Jews don't have anything to do with it.
Well, by culture, yes. By culture, yes. That's why you have all these professors in these universities, and all the Khazars, or the Ashkenazi that came from Europe. This is their mindset, the Babylonian Talmud, and there's a lot of writing.
Annette, I'm very sorry that something happened during your life that made you hate an entire group of people, most of whom have absolutely no idea what you're even talking about.
Well,
I'm sorry that happened to you, and I don't know how it happened or why you think that way, but it just is not true.
But wait a minute.
That's like saying every Indian is going to scalp you.
Oh.
Or every Indian is a drunk Indian, and it's their culture. It's
Bill,
not
what
true.
are you saying?
Because that's exactly what you are saying.
But to speak a truth is not hate. And also...
You're not speaking truth.
Oh, I'm speaking from their writing.
You are not...
They say they believe it. Now, there is...
Annette, who is they? Who is they?
The Jewish establishment.
What is the Jewish establishment? You started off saying all Jews. Now you're changing that, right?
I said the Jewish religion. Now, there is a very...
Annette, that's not true. The Jewish religion does not. And most Jews have no part of anything called the Babylonian Talmud.
Well, Bill,
most Jews are just like you and me. They're not a part of anything except trying to make a decent living, raise their children, and somehow survive all this crap. They don't know anything about a new world order. They're not trying to destroy Christianity or anybody else.
Bill, when you speak something that has been published and is the policy...
No, Annette, it may be the policy of some people who abide by it.
But if it sets the policy for a whole nation, then it's something to be...
They're not a nation, Annette. American Jews are Americans.
Well, no, when it sets the policy for the United States, I'm talking about.
They don't set the policy for the United States. Congress does. Congress passes the laws.
The Congress passes the law, but who dictates to Congress? They have...
Annette, come on. How many Jews are in Congress? Come on, tick them off for me. How many exactly?
There are a lot more...
How many are there? How many representatives are Jews? How many representatives are in the House of Representatives to begin with?
Well, in the first place, you see, you're going off on a tangent.
No, I'm not. You said that they're dictating to the United States. Now, how can they dictate to the United States when they don't even have enough votes to pass a law in Congress?
I want to get to the religion. There is a school...
Good night, Annette. I have to do again what I did to you last night because it doesn't sink into your head. This broadcast is not about the Jews. And you made so many statements that are just absolutely fake, false bullshit that you can't go on with that. That's not tonight's topic. Whenever we've had those kinds of things as a topic, you didn't call in and do this. But you wouldn't last if you did. You started off saying the entire Jews, all the Jews. It's not true. Then you said it's the Jewish religion. That's not true either. The most sacred text in the Jewish religion is the Torah. And that's what you'll find on their altar. That's the first document they get and hide and bury and try to preserve when they're persecuted. They don't try to grab the Babylonian Talmud and hide it and keep it safe. It's the Torah. You've been taught so many wrong things. There are Jews who are bad. There are Christians who are bad. There are Catholics who are bad. There are Mormons who are bad. There are Native Americans who are bad. But there is not one people on this whole earth who are all bad or even most bad. It's a lie. It's an absolute lie. It's like the blacks blaming everything in their life on Whitey. It's a lie. Good evening. You're on the air.
Hi, Bill.
Yes?
How you doing tonight?
Another nut. 520-333-4578. Getting to where I can smell them. You know what? 520-333-4578 is the number. Oh, brother. I get so sick of this crap. There is no master race. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what your religion is. There is no master religion. Got that? God made all people. If you're a Christian, listen to this. Jesus said it. Whomsoever believeth in me shall have everlasting life. Good evening. You're on the air.
Hi. one other thing I have to ask you. I read it somewhere. I don't know where I read it, but here's what it says. Maybe somebody will call in and tell you where it's written, or maybe you know. It says, should your government become so corrupt that you have to overthrow your government to save your country. It has something to do with us having the right to bear arms. Where did you ever hear it? Did you ever read it?
I've never heard that before.
Oh, really? Bless your heart. I did read it. I read it to my husband.
Well, if you ever find it, send us a copy and
I'd love to.
We'll talk about it.
Anyone hears it, maybe they'll call in and say where they read it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And my husband wants to talk to you.
Okay.
Hi there.
Hello.
My name is Ken. I wonder if you could do me a favor. My wife and I are both patriots, and I'm a ham operator. And I'm attempting to establish a network of ham operators throughout the United States. I'm going to call it the Paul Revere Patriots, that will keep us informed of what is actually going on, because you don't hear anything that's true on NBC, CBS, and the rest of them.
Well, that's true, and that's a very good idea. Why don't you give a frequency and a date and a time, and you can all get together on that frequency and figure out how you're going to do it.
Well, so far I've got California, Louisiana, and Minnesota.
Well, if you want to make this work, you need to give a date and a time and a frequency, so the people that are listening, that are interested, can call you, and you'll be listening, and you can hook up.
Right. Well, we meet Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on 21.240. But that is not a very good frequency this time of the year. I would like to have any ham that is interested get me on my the net here, and it's Ken Bev at localnet.com.
Okay, and that's Monday, Tuesday, and Monday, Wednesday, and Friday?
Yeah, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Okay.
So 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, it's difficult. I can get a hold of the guy in Louisiana, but sunspots and so on and so forth make it difficult to hit California and some of the other states. So I think we should change the frequency and come down on 20 meters or possibly even 7. If any of them listening have got any thing that they would like to promote on this as a different frequency, I would appreciate them letting me know, because some of this is going to have to be done on the telephone. I just can't reach them with our present frequencies that we're using. Okay. Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks a million.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
520-333-4578. One of the, I'm going to tell you, folks, every major conflict and most of the murder and killing that's ever taken place in the world is all because of somebody thought that they were a superior race or a superior religion. And it's got to stop. Good evening. You're on the air.
Yeah, hello, Bill. This is Ron.
Hi, Ron.
And just wanted to call up and say hello. I heard a couple callers. The first one was some guy said a bad word, was racist against Jewish people. I just wanted to call up and say that's not very nice, because being a racist is not nice against Jewish people or people who are black or people who are gay. I think it's my opinion. I think it's wrong to hate someone because of the color of their skin or if they're a woman or anything. I just think it's not very nice. And on the shortwave, you hear these preachers pushing, like you said, Christian identity. Pastor Petey or whatever.
Yeah.
They you listen to them, they preach, but then they say it's the Jewish people.
Yeah, but listen to what they preach. What they're preaching is the Jewish religion. They're preaching the Jewish religion, and they claim that they're the real Israel.
Then they say terrible. They call gay people faggots. They actually say that on the shortwave, and it really bothers me. Well,
it bothers me too. It's nobody's business what consenting adults.
Or how tall they are, or how heavy they are.
It's nobody's business what consenting adults do in the privacy of their own home. Now, if they were to come and try to hit on my daughter and make her a lesbian or something, that's a different story. But
I
But that's what freedom is, and I'm for freedom. I may not approve of what they do personally, but I'm not doing it. And God will judge them for what they do, not me.
I know. You're right.
As long as they don't hurt the person or property of any other human being, I don't care what they do. It's between them and God. Judge not, lest ye be judged. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Whomsoever believeth in me shall have everlasting life.
Well, on the shortwave, I go up and down the dial and you hear terrible words. They say the Jewish people have all the money. Well, isn't that the right idea? If the Jewish people have all the money, then what's wrong with it? That's the right idea. That's great.
Well, doesn't it tell you something?
That's wrong. The Jewish people don't.
Aren't they saying that they're too stupid to go out and make that much money?
There's nothing wrong with money and having a lot of money. I think it's wrong to say the Jews.
Well, anyway, that's not the subject for tonight.
So what's the subject, though?
But the subject is deception, and how are we fooled, and what do we do about it when we find out we're being fooled? And why do we believe all these lies that float around all the time?
Well, for me, I don't use my brain sometimes. I don't think. Sometimes I don't have an original thought. When you read a book, you got to sit down and really read. Now, the guy calls up, you turn on the TV, and I sit in my chair. I turn on the TV, and I turn the TV on, I'm sitting there, I'm like in a trance, and I just watch and watch, and not the news, but the sitcoms and stuff.
But why?
I don't watch Wheel of Fortune. That's too sickening.
Yeah, but why do you do that? Because a lot of the brainwashing that goes on is in those sitcoms. I mean, if you listen to those things and watch them, you'll see that they're changing the way people think and behave.
I work second shift, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. I don't watch that much TV, but I didn't mean to get off the topic, but you hear it on the shortwave, racism, sexism, but I just want to call. Thanks for nice talking to you. This is Ron from upstate New York, Binghamton, and I called earlier, but I just don't like that.
Well, I don't like it either.
There's one thing I do hate, and I don't like, and they cause a lot of problems. I think they cause 100% of the problems, and I think they're all involved, and that's Masons. I think all of them, A-L-L, all of them, not 90 or 95 or 99, I think all of them.
That's not the subject tonight. Thanks for calling. I don't think they're they're not 100% of the problem, but they're certainly a big part of the problem, without any doubt at all. And I think we've pretty much proven that in our Mystery Babylon series. Good evening. You're on the air.
Yeah, could you not hang up this time, please? And I'm not a nut.
Well, are you going to say something?
Yeah, I had some things written down. Like what you're talking about is going over my head. But that's like I listen to shortwave all day, and there's a new channel called Prevalent, and there's a neat way of getting your radio inside your old stereo is with this little transmitter that you can get at one of the local radio stores.
But this isn't the topic tonight. If you've been listening, you know what the topic is, right?
No, it's going over my head now.
Well, you can't help it, man. Get a new head. This is not, 520-333-4578 is the number. If it's going over your head, maybe you shouldn't be listening to this broadcast. I think it's pretty simple. We're talking about how people are fooled by lies. Whether it's passed to you on a piece of paper, or you get it on a fax machine, or you hear it on the radio, or you hear it on television, or see it, or whatever, and how you react to it. Why are we fooled by this stuff, and why do we continue to be fooled, and what do we do about it? Good evening. You're on the air.
Hi, Bill. This is David in Columbus, Ohio.
Hi, David.
I know that I'm going to be on your topic tonight for a change.
Good.
But you've been talking about deception and misleading information over the media, such as radio, faxes, television, whatnot. And I just thought I would mention another area where the same kind of thing is going on.
And where's that?
And that's like at seminars. I have a couple of examples.
Go for it. Go for it, because you're right. Go for it.
Yeah, because in the last several years, it's gotten to be very popular
in many workplaces, especially large companies and government agencies, to bring in these so-called experts and to take a whole workday, quite often, to have all the employees sit around and listen to, frankly, a lot of BS. Just to mention a couple of examples, and this is only a couple because it goes on in different areas, but one thing that became very popular a year or so ago in a lot of large shops is a new style of management called TQM, or Total Quality Management. And this is kind of a new age, kind of feel-good kind of thing where there's no one that's a leader. You know, everything is done by circles, things like that. And it's bizarre. I've had a very hard time trying to comprehend what the real essence of TQM is. Well, they brought in this expert on TQM that supposedly turned Eastman Kodak around. Quote, Eastman Kodak would no longer exist. They hadn't adopted TQM.
I doubt that very seriously, but go ahead.
Well, so do I, because first of all, how do you know? I mean, how do you know if you didn't do something if the results would have been different? And secondly, I don't think Eastman Kodak is in that great a shape anyway. They're surviving, but anyway. But those were the kind of assertions that he was making. And one of the things he said is at one time he was a volunteer at one of these libraries for the blind, where, they sent out books on cassette and braille books, that kind of thing. And that they would, in dedication to their work, they would spend hours working late, making sure that all the cassettes were rewound and that everything was in good shape before they send the books out. Well, it just so happens that I happen to be a user of that service. And I can tell you that no such thing occurs. I get books all the time where the cassettes haven't been rewound and things like that, and they're damaged and so on. First of all, these places handle thousands of books a day. Literally thousands.
Sure.
And there's no way that they're going to have people paid or volunteer or whatever to go through all that. So they rely upon the user to mark the book if there's a problem, and then they'll look at it. My point is this. That may seem like a trivial example, but my point is this, that if some guy is coming in to try to espouse some kind of idea or approach or whatnot, and he uses as examples to substantiate what he's trying to say, lies, and you know they're lies, then that to me puts into severe doubt the main point that he's trying to make. And and of course, it's been going on. They spend an unbelievable amount of time with this stuff at work, and it's proven to have no results that anybody can see.
What it does is it confuses people.
Definitely. And it also takes up a great deal of potentially productive time.
Yeah, you ought to see what happens, too, when these circles become split in what they want to do, and there's no way to reach a consensus. Everything stops.
But it's a whole new aging kind of thing. I mean, they, no one is to be like a leader in a meeting. They don't, like they'll say things, we do not want to give awards for good performance to an individual. We only want to give awards to a team. Things like that.
Yeah, well, that's what they're teaching children in school.
Exactly.
We don't want to give you a grade because if you don't measure up to the standard, it might hurt your self-esteem. So everybody passes, and there are no grades given, and there are no failures either.
Another thing that goes on now is the seminars that go on usually for a day, talking about ethnicity. They'll bring in some supposed experts on multiculturalism, and they'll spend the entire day basically talking about how one group or another, particularly Afro-Americans or Black Americans, have been downtrodden and everything has been stolen from them. The ancient Egyptians were black, and the Greeks stole everything from Egypt and claimed it as their own. Aristotle, all of that, and that they took it from the library at Alexandria. Even though anybody who knows history
knows that the library at Alexandria was built centuries after Aristotle lived, and things like that. The one thing they base a lot of this on, they'll claim like Beethoven was actually a black man.
What they base all of this on is the stupidity of the people they're talking to believe it.
That's right. In other words, history, the training and teaching of history has gotten so poor.
Well, they're in the process of changing history intentionally.
Oh, yes, revisionism.
Yes.
And, but as I said, it's so poor and it's mistaught and everything else. And most of the people in the audience, number one, they're not in a position to evaluate what they're hearing. Number two, many of them want to believe what they're hearing anyway, because it fits their prejudices.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's all over. I mean, it's just incredible. So I just wanted to mention that it's going on at many, many different levels.
And it's, in my estimation, it's another form of racism also.
I agree.
How do you think those poor people sitting in there feel hearing about, how terrible they are and how they've been picked on and maligned and stuff? Well, I mean, that doesn't help people. It doesn't give them any self-esteem.
Well,
it makes them victims.
How do you give someone self-esteem by lying to them?
Well, you can't. You have to give them the opportunity to accomplish something that matters on their own.
Well, how would you feel, though, if you were pumped up all your childhood and early adulthood and eventually someday you found out it wasn't true? I would think that would destroy self-esteem.
Well, it sure did me, because most of my life people were teaching me lies, and when I finally found out what was really going on, I mean, I had nothing to hold on to after that until I started doing research and finding out what the truth was. Now I hang on to the truth just as hard as I can.
The only other point I want to make real quick, Bill, is that unfortunately, I know what you're talking about, having the facts and prove everything. Often that's difficult because you hear so much stuff. You can't research everything you hear.
But you have to at least try to research that which is the most important.
Right, and the other thing that you can do if you are a carefully thinking person and really evaluate what you're listening to, even though you may not take the time to prove everything, but is what you're hearing consistent with what you do know? In other words, if something doesn't fit with things that you are pretty sure about, that you do have facts on, then that should definitely be questioned.
Well, it should raise a red flag, yes.
Absolutely. And that, a lot of times, is about all you can do on some things.
Well, I don't buy that. People have to start looking actively for the truth. They have to determine what it is. We can no longer trust anybody to tell us what the truth is. You can't trust me to tell you what the truth is. That's why I keep telling you, listen to everyone, read everything, believe absolutely nothing unless you can prove it yourself.
Well, I've pretty much eliminated most things I don't believe. I watch almost no television.
Good for you.
Which is why when you talk about things on television, it's news to me because I didn't see it. Yeah. But then I'm usually very glad I didn't because...
well, unfortunately, I have to watch at least some of it in order to determine how they're trying to fool us now.
Right. And I appreciate your bringing that up on the air because I try to filter to some extent what I think are reasonably good sources versus what I know to be very bad sources. But I just don't have the time. Okay, Bill, I'll let you go.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for calling. 520-333-4578 is the number. Good evening. You're on the air.
Hi. This is John from Pennsylvania.
Hi, John.
Hi. I heard a rumor on the shortwave that the Jews are running our government.
Oh, really? I heard a rumor on the shortwave that you're a stupid jerk. And every time you do something like that, you prove it. Jews are running our government. How many Jews are in our government? Did you ever count them? You're really starting to make me want to do a show on you. You see, these are the same people who believe that the white race is becoming extinct because they're being forced by the Jews to intermarry. Have you ever seen any Jews point a gun at some white dude's head and make him marry somebody of another race? I've never seen it. You know what the real problem is? Is these racists are so despicable that a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman doesn't want to have anything to do with them. Good evening, you're on the air.
Yeah, Paul from Ohio.
Hi, Paul.
Yeah, I tuned in a little late, but I guess you're talking about why people believe lies and their crap.
Yeah. Yeah, how can racists believe that? I mean, that's a good topic. I mean, that's a falsehood. But they actually believe they're being bred out of existence. And I keep telling them, if you really believe that, why don't you find a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman who can prove that she's pure white blood for so many generations and marry her and have 27 children?
Yeah.
If they would all do that, they wouldn't have anything to worry about.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't have the answers, but, the reasoning behind human nature, but I think sometimes it's easier to, believe things that aren't true, or, sometimes it's more exciting, on the other hand.
Oh, so you think there's an element of excitement in it? You might have something there.
Yeah, I mean, well, with the contrail thing, for instance, and, you're mentioning, I guess, when you first came on tonight about, the fax networks, and I remember, these past years, in the Patriot movement, you get all these wild faxes and emails, and whatnot, and there's a little bit of excitement to it, and I think it, pushes their button a little bit, some emotional high they need to get, fixed.
One day I looked at the pile of paper on the floor from the Patriot Fax Network, and I yanked the phone line out of the wall and gave the fax machine away.
Yeah, I remember one time, a few years back, someone started a rumor, about Southern Ohio, having a FEMA roadblock set up, and that was, the hot topic of the day then, and, and I eventually met the guy, I think, who started it, and, he did it as a joke, and, it was, kind of a sick joke, I thought, but, he got everyone.
I think some of these things are started as jokes. I think some of them are started as intentional disinformation, and I think some of them are started to and are continually starting new ones in order to discredit all of these people who deal in these things. They become discredited after a while, totally discredited. Nobody wants to listen to a thing they have to say.
The deal with Kosovo going on, I was, had some relatives recently this past weekend, and, they started showing it on the news, film clips of what's going on over there, and, someone earlier mentioned about the trance going on, they immediately set into a trance, and you couldn't talk to them about it, and, someone mentioned, about, the beautiful blonde-haired child, refugee child they saw, and I think, it's an emotional thing, they're feeding into their emotions, and it's, just easier not to dig the truth out.
Isn't it strange, though, that they don't give a damn about the beautiful little black child with the black hair in Rwanda?
Yeah.
They're children.
Yeah, child's a child.
Child is a child, and they're innocent, and they're precious, and they're wonderful, but nobody gives a damn.
Right.
We have never helped anybody in Africa, ever, because they're black.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's all I gotta say. I think it boils down to sometimes just being easier and sometimes exciting, about believing all the crap.
Yeah, well, I think you may have something there. I think a lot of people get into this repetitive adrenaline rush. Oh, they're coming to get us. Oh, yeah. The adrenaline starts pumping, and they get this big adrenaline high, and they're running around. And, the contrails, the plane flew over. There's contrails out there. Don't go outside. And they feed off of that. It makes their dismal, terrible life, or at least they have a feeling that it is.
One other thing you just reminded me of, that, for, I guess, the past few years, everyone's been waiting for the light blue helmets to come, rush into our shorelines, And
they're already here.
I know, but, it's like, like I said, they're already here.
It's called the United States Army.
Yeah, plus they're wearing, the black ski mask, like you've been mentioning the last couple of days,
Yeah.
They're, enemies have been here, and he is here, so So.
Yeah, he is here. I remember the Pogo cartoon. Yeah. And when he went off in the Piro with Churchy and all the other little animals, and they went off to find the enemy.
Yeah.
And for a couple of weeks there, we were watching in the comic strip what all the little women creatures were doing back in the camp. And then one day heard this shout out in the swamp, and here comes Pogo and Churchy and all the guys in the Piro, and they beach it, and Pogo jumps out and says, "We have found the enemy, and they are us."
Yeah.
And he is absolutely correct.
All right, I'll let you go.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Oh, boy. Amazing. What fools there are out there. That's one way they divide and conquer us, by teaching fools that they're supposed to be different or better, or they're being oppressed by somebody who looks different or goes to a different church or has a different color of skin. Good evening. You're on the air.
Good morning, Bill. Good evening, Bill.
I need you to talk a lot louder. I can barely hear you.
This is Nick from New York.
Hi, Nick. Talk a lot louder. Come on, yell into that phone.
Okay. About deception, one reason why we've been propagandized or brainwashed from cradle to grave. And like you said the other night about John McCain, Manchurian candidate, we all seem to be partly Manchurian candidates here.
Well, you're right about that.
But the thing that I'd like to say is that, there are people, even because of our American way, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, we still have that piece of belief inside of us that flows in our blood. And I think, in the long run, that will see us through. And, like you say about prejudice and racism, I don't call it so much racism when it comes down to the regular man. It's like unknowledgeable racism. It's just propaganda that's in us. And we practice it, and we have to realize what it is so that we can overcome it.
Yeah, but I got to differ with you on one thing. It's not in us. It's taught to us.
That's what I mean. No,
if you take a bunch of children and you put them together and nobody ever tells them that there's something wrong with the color of their skin or the religion that they believe in, they'll play together and grow up together, and they won't have any problems whatsoever.
Totally agree with you. It's like watching chauvinism. Chauvinism was part of us. We have to realize that it's unknowledgeable. We don't see it and feel it. It was just bred into us, with the propaganda.
Well, not bred into us, taught to us. It was taught to us.
Right. And the same thing with the racism. It's unknowledgeable racism that breeds the prejudice.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think, all our freedoms within us will overcome these things. When you look back at the war, the 369th Regiment out of Harlem, that most decorated unit in the European campaign, what were they fighting for? Freedom. I think in the long run, the American people will have their say because freedom is within us.
Yeah, well, that's what my whole life is about. That's what everything I do is about. It's about freedom. And until people understand that and learn that they can't be free unless they allow everyone else to be free, and that's really what the problem is. That is the root source of all the problems in the world, is that somebody wants to force somebody else to do something that they don't want to do.
Well, I tell, people, I talk to hundreds and hundreds of people, and I try to tell them that, in this country, freedom means you don't have to love somebody or like somebody or live next to somebody or eat somebody's food or anything like that. The only thing you have to do is treat them with civility and respect.
And leave them alone.
Right. And if you don't do that, especially in these times, that borders on treason.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct.
I mean that to it. But not one of our leaders ever says anything like that. They always just divisive, divide us, subdivide us. That's all it's about. It's division, division, division.
Well, that's how we're controlled. United we stand, divided we fall. That's what it's all about.
Okay, and one last thing I'd like to say to you, besides the fact that, I appreciate what you're doing, but the one last thing is try to understand the little people. We're so many of them, I see them on the ground level all the time, and they're so brainwashed. Don't let them
get your dander up too much because we need you that much more.
Well, I appreciate that.
Okay, have a good night. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you for calling. 520-333-4578. It's it's been a good evening, I think. Good evening. You're on the air.
Good evening, Bill. This is Ray in New York.
Hi, Ray.
Just wanted to mention that I think primarily the reason the deception is around so long, I think it's one of the key mysteries that we've talked about over the years. I think since the ancient times, this is one of the key ways to enslave the people is to confuse their minds, and their minds are already enslaved. I think it has to come full circle before they can come out of it.
Well, I think you're absolutely correct. That's one of the methods that the priests and the kings and the leaders have used to keep people subservient, is to hide the truth from them and keep them confused and divided and all of those things that you mentioned.
I don't see any way around it. I think it has to go full circle. I think now that, particularly with Americans, we're already enslaved, or at least many of us are.
Yes, you're right, and it's unfortunate that they don't even know it.
We're already enslaved in our mind. They just don't realize. They're just not physically. The shackles haven't been placed on them yet.
Mm-hmm.
But I did want to mention something else very quickly. Last night I was watching the local news here in New York City. There was a demonstration in Manhattan of about several thousand people protesting the situation in Yugoslavia, and many of them holding up their targets. And the news media was commenting that, well, these were ethnic Serbians here living in New York, and just kind of pawned it off. But if you looked very carefully at the crowd, there were black people there, there were Oriental people there. I don't think they were Serbians, but the news media is just not saying anything about it. I didn't see anything about the demonstration on the national news.
No, you know that there's been major demonstrations in all the major cities all across the country, and it's not being covered at all, and it's not just the Serbs, it's everyday, ordinary Americans. In fact, the only demonstration that I saw at all on any major network, and that was CNN, was when Vice President Gore went to California. They couldn't keep from showing the people along the road holding up signs saying, "Get out of Yugoslavia," and there were just thousands and thousands of them.
Well, I wanted to tell you, I got my targets flying, and I wanted to ask if it might be possible that you might put something on the website, a common target that we can print up, that not only includes the target, but also might mention HOTT or something to that effect, so we can recognize each other.
There's all kinds of things on the website. In fact, the background of the home page is targets.
Well, I've seen that, but I was wondering about specifically a target page that we could print out, and people, other listeners, might be able to recognize. Because if I have a target on my car or a target on my front door, and most of the people just look at it, and even if they recognize it for what it is from what they saw in the news, they may not recognize, hey, that's another hour of the time listener. We need to be able to communicate. We need to be able to recognize each other, even if it's just to wave as we pass each other in traffic.
Well, I'll see what I can come up with.
Thank you, Bill. I'm going to get off. Let somebody else get in there. I just wanted to thank you for everything you're doing. We love you. God bless.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And thank you for calling. 520-333-4578. Good evening. You're on the air.
Hi, Bill. It's Louise in Chicago again.
Hi, Louise.
I think I have an answer for you on why do people believe lies and everything. One simple word. Cowardice.
Well, but you're saying they believe it. Cowardice means they wouldn't believe it, but they would just go along with it rather than...
Absolutely.
Okay. I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I think a lot of...
We just heard about confusion. How many people are confused who don't know whether the income tax is lawful or not, but they're not confused when they send their payment off? They do it.
Yeah, they do it.
And when they hear
Well, if they've ever been to my webpage and read the law, and it's all there, I laid it out so that even the dumbest of the dumb can figure it out, and they're still paying income tax, it is because of cowardice and for no other reason.
And that's just the beginning. That's just part of it. The rest of it is, the founders said, and it's not because they said it, but because it's true, self-evident truth, it's an axiom, that we were endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. That doesn't take a laboratory to figure out. It's part of our nature. And I believe, and it just makes common sense if you look throughout nature, that wherever there is such an endowment, an instinct, there is also a mechanism that very profoundly will warn the creature when those endowments are in danger or jeopardy. That is how I got into the Patriot movement. I'm certain that's how you did too. Something just didn't feel right. And when you found out what it was, you probably hit the roof.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
And the next step is to look in the mirror and say, you know what, that person is why this country's falling apart.
Yeah.
It hurts.
It does, but it's the truth.
Absolutely. And the truth scares people.
Yeah.
It scares them because they're cowards.
Well, you're right. You're right on the money. And
I have a feeling, and I'm very sorry to say this because it pains me a lot, but Bill, I have a feeling that when you expose, and you already have exposed, and you expose every little detail, you're going to have the people, they're going to look and say, oh, it is the truth, but I like things the way they are. Because they're cowards. Because they don't want to do what's right. That's why an entire group, which can be dehumanized to the point of being called the masses by their oppressors, who are socialists, who seek to oppress them from the beginning, can be pushed around by that tiny group.
Yeah.
So it doesn't much matter what secret societies they're members of. That's only important as for studying the mechanics of a part of the decision-making part of the enemy. The main part is not those who commit the atrocities, but those who consent. We have government by consent. That's the way it's always been anywhere with human beings, any place.
Yeah, they consent by silence.
Right, and
that's why I've always hated the silent majority. I can't stand it. But I know some people who are proud. They say, I'm a part of the silent majority, and I'm really proud of it. And I look at them and I say, you're a fool.
No one will ever know about them because they're proud of it.
You're silent
the
because
ones who make history. They won't be the ones who rescue.
They're silent because they have no guts. No guts.
And in silence, they're just as silent as a pile of excrement in some cesspool somewhere. And they're about as useful. Except to those who would manipulate them.
I'm starting to like you an awful lot.
And, that's what it is.
Well,
the truth is there.
Yeah.
They don't want to see it. Remember that character that used a bunch of obscenities at you because you told him a few things? I wanted to call in then, but I didn't quite get able to get called in. And I was going to tell you that, what I was observing? I just saw you, I heard him lash out at you because you pulled his little rose-colored glasses off. And he didn't like what he saw, and it reminded him of what a big, fat coward he was. And he blamed you for calling him a coward in so many words, even though that's exactly what he was, and even though there's millions more like them in this country. And this country is no longer the land of the free because it's no longer the home of the brave.
Boy, you got that right. I couldn't have said that any better. In fact, probably wouldn't have. But you said it wonderfully. Listen.
What we need to do is learn how to withdraw our consent. It is our duty. It's more than our right. It's our duty.
Yes, and we're out of time.
Okay.
Hate to tell you that, but it's true.
Okay, well, God bless you, Bill.
God bless you, too.
Keep it up.
And thank you for calling in. Thank you for being the last caller, because now everybody's going to go to bed tonight having to think about all the truths that you just put into their ears. They're going to have to confront some of that cowardice. And that's exactly what it is. I mean, I've had people admit it to me. Some real nice people that I really like, as a matter of fact, have just flat told me, I know you're right, and I know someday they're going to come to get you, Bill, but, I just haven't got the guts to pick up a gun and come and help you when they do. And then I've heard other people say that they'll be here lickety-split, and I'll believe that when I see it. Because I know most of them won't be anywhere near here. They'll be slinking off somewhere so that so that they can say that they weren't around and didn't know about it. Well, folks, that's the end of tonight's broadcast. I want to thank all of you who contributed, and I want to thank all of you who called in and made fools out of yourself and exposed yourselves for what you are. I love it when you do that. Of course, you probably don't think that's what you did, but that's exactly what you did. Good night, folks, and God bless each and every single one of you.
Sky full of poison,